Okay, this is Thomas Freed on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and yes, that's right, folks. We're back. We're back with the Truth Attack. Okay, so I got a lot I want to try and go through today. Let's just get right into this. We are the Liberty Works Radio Network, and we do need the support of the members of the listening audience to keep the broadcast network operating. So, if you enjoy the shows, the information, the lectures, the discussions, the guests, and the hosts on the other shows on the network, we sure would appreciate it if you could find your way over to the LibertyWorksRadioNetwork.com website and get signed up as a subscribing member, even if it's as little as $15, $20 a month. Every membership helps, and we do need your support to keep the broadcast network operating. So, tell your friends, neighbors, relatives, business associates, and family to tune in, get informed, and join the march returning to liberty and freedom under a constitutional government in this country. And if you want to get fully informed and well and properly educated on the maladministration of the federal personal income tax by the IRS, the DOJ, and the lower federal courts for the last 75 years. You want to find your way over here to taxfreedom.com and start reading, get educated, because the Supreme Court has given us another ruling as of 2024 that turns the entire IRS, DOJ, lower court enforcement set into fraudulent mush. It proves the whole thing is a fraud and has been basically since World War II. Everybody in this country knows there's something wrong with the way the IRS behaves, and this website explains it all to you via the most recent Supreme Court ruling, which supports everything that's been on the website for 35 years. Because it's the government that's lying to you. Of course. It's what they exist to do, is to deceive you into being a working slave for the institutions that run the system. And the elite that staff and basically run those institutions. Okay, so if you want to get educated, taxfreedom.com. If you need help, IRSZoom.com. I can help you answer any letter you receive from the IRS, and we can help you argue and answer the Department of Justice in court based on the new rulings in Moore v. U.S., where the court says income tax is an indirect tax under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. That, of course, means it's not the direct tax without limitation, the non-apportioned direct tax that the IRS, the DOJ, and the lower courts have been enforcing under the 16th Amendment for the last 75 years. It's not a direct tax under the 16th Amendment. It's an indirect tax under Article 1. They've been lying to you about the fundamental constitutional nature of the tax, and this lie goes to the heart of the issue, which is the lack in the federal courts of subject matter jurisdiction to enforce the operational practice being conducted as a direct tax without limitation, rather than as a uniform indirect tax, which is how it has been constitutionally authorized and stated as such by the Supreme Court since 1916, when the tax originated. All of the enforcement since World War II as a direct tax is constitutional fraud. Constitutional fraud. All done by judicial legislation. The liberal lower court judges just made it up. They just made it up to enforce and support the system they adopted during World War II, which premised under World War II that the government can do anything it needs to win the war, including violating the Constitution, locking up the Japanese descendants in internment camps without cause or charge, attaching themselves to the salaries and wages, the right to work, the labors of the American people for the first time through the victory tax, and basically assuming a totalitarian authority where they rationed goods, co-opted the production of all goods in the United States, and told the American people to shut up, sit down, be a slave, or go sit in an internment camp. So they got away with it, right? They got away with it. Most Americans didn't object to the victory tax, and it funded and paid for the war within the 2 years it was operational. And when the war ended and the victory tax expired, because it couldn't go on, being a 2-year temporary war revenue measure, which the Constitution says all war revenue measures can only last for 2 years. Each Congress must reauthorize the continued funding of the war started by the previous administration. And if the American people don't like the fact that the previous administration dragged them into a war, they can vote in 2 years for new House of Representatives that is based on, the election of the new House is based on promises of the candidates elected to end the war. And how do you end the war? You stop the funding of it. You don't renew the bill that expires. Because historically, when the government stops paying the soldiers, they stop fighting. They go home. Now, America has kind of broken that rule almost every time. Revolutionary War, they didn't get paid and they stayed. Civil War, they didn't get paid and they stayed. World War I, they got paid, but delayed. World War II, they got paid, again, but delayed. North Korea was never declared as war. I'll argue they never had any right to draft anyone for either North Korea or Vietnam. If the U.S. Congress doesn't have the balls to declare war, they don't have the legal power to draft citizens to go be police officers in a foreign country where they have no jurisdiction. Nor do they have jurisdiction in the states to draft people if there isn't a declared war. So I don't know what the Supreme Court said about this, but they got it wrong. They got it wrong. I don't care what they say. If Congress hasn't got the balls to declare war, the government doesn't have the authority to draft people to be police officers around the world. That's just nonsense. That is the empire, the empirical, rather than the Republican rule of law, which protects the individual rights of the citizen that the government cannot violate except in circumstances of extreme necessity or emergency, i.e., a declared war, or perhaps an invasion, where the declaration is pending, but not yet made for some reason. Of course, Congress is an idiot. They can't do anything, right? Okay, so let's get into it. What are we going to talk about today? Socialism. You're going to have to go back and review some of the current events. Socialism seems to be, what's sweeping across the youth and taking over the Democratic Party, even though the old guard stands there and denies it. It's absolutely the motivational and driving force in the Democratic Party today. It's the Democratic Socialist arm that's winning the elections with these radical, literally Communist Party candidates. And I thought we should take a look at how this is developing, why, and what's wrong with it. And of course, let's just jump right to the bottom line. Socialism is a lie. It's an absolute lie. It does not exist. It has never existed. It doesn't exist. Socialism is a word they made up to describe the condition that ultimately exists. But it isn't a condition where the government is operated for the benefit of we the people or of any group of people. That's the lie. What's wrong with socialism? What does socialism always turn into? It doesn't exist because socialism, whenever it takes over, it immediately turns into a dictatorship. And that's what you end up with. a dictatorship. There's no government for the people, and no benefits for the people. The dictator takes over and turns the people into tax slaves. He steals the industries he wants. He murders the people who oppose him. He puts in prison the wealthy whose money he wants. And then while they're in prison, he takes it. Always it degrades into a dictatorship. Socialism is not a dream. It's the nightmare. It's the Orwellian nightmare of the Brave New World on the Animal Farm in 1984. Every single time. These uneducated, ignorant youth have been indoctrinated by 20 years of public school agenda that doesn't teach fact and science anymore. It teaches agenda by propaganda. And the whole point is to indoctrinate and control with psychological and emotional arguments that are completely devoid of science, fact, and history. Oh, socialism is wonderful. Rent is free. Food is free. Transportation is free. Education is free. Lies! 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 Only certain people get to eat. Only certain people get educated. Only certain people actually get medical treatment. It's never the population that gets these things. It's only the elite, the friends, the cadre that supports the dictator. Every single time it becomes the nightmare of a dictatorship. Socialism doesn't exist. It never existed. It's always tyranny, empirical dictatorship. Every single time. And this isn't what's taught to the kids in school, is it? What's taught to the kids in school is free, wonderful, everything good, never actually been tried. That's because it doesn't exist. It's a lie. It always comes out of a political movement that in the end results in a dictatorship, whether it comes out of a military coup or a civilian rebellion. Every single time it results in a dictatorship. Let's go through some of the examples. Now, you know, we're coming up here on the commercial break in just a moment, so we'll hold off on that. We'll start there when we get back. But, you know, the youth today, as I said, the public school system, which is taken over and controlled by the federal government, which manipulates the states and controls the curriculum that they use by attaching strings to the federal money that funds the schools. So if the states don't adopt the weak, socialist, communistic, nonsensical, non-factual, liberal curriculum agenda and teach things like gender studies and race relations instead of reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, chemistry, physics, biology. No, they don't teach biology anymore, do they? A woman is whoever feels like a woman. There's no more X, 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 Y. And that's the biological basis for a woman. You want to know what a woman is? XX. Spit. XX. XY. You lie. XX. You're in. So they don't teach fact anymore. They just teach the agenda and the propaganda they want the youth to believe, and it goes to this form of government where they're not teaching law, they're teaching demands, desire, emotion. Be driven and governed by your emotions, not facts or law or economics or science or reality of accounting. Just desire. Okay, we'll be back in 5 with more. Okay, this is Thomas Fried on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and let's just get back into this. I was explaining socialism is a lie. It doesn't exist. A form of government doesn't exist because it always degrades into a dictatorship almost immediately. It becomes, out of its formation, a dictatorship. And dictatorships kill the opposition. They don't allow any opposition politically to exist within the country once the dictator takes over. There's no socialism. There's no more a common agreement between the population and its arguments and a compromise that's made that considers all of the positions. It's a dictatorship. The one guy throws away everybody else's opinions and beliefs and imposes his own, and then orders his troops to go out and implement it. And they do. Let's look at the history, shall we? Socialism. Where did it start? Karl Marx and Russia, right? And the youth are so deluded, they've been indoctrinated into believing this is government instead of murder. Now let's get on with it. Russia. It starts with Karl Marx. And who did that end up with? Lenin. And what was that? Oh, that's right, a dictatorship. And who took over? Stalin. Another dictatorship. So Russia and the idealist communist state immediately became a dictatorship under Lenin and Marx and then Stalin. And the list of dictators since then is continuous. I don't think I need to go through the names of all the Russian leaders through history that assumed the role of dictator and controlled Russia with an iron hand, and all of the European satellite states under the Soviet Socialist Republic came out of the end of World War II, where Russia took control of all of those Eastern German states to create an insular border between Russia and Germany where they could control for 500 miles or so, crossing the new countries. So let's look at that. Russia, Marx, Lenin, Stalin, absolute dictatorship. What do we have next? How about China? Oh, that's right, Mao, absolute dictatorship. And again, I don't think I need to go through the list of the dictators in China that have ruled since then, but they've all been dictators. They pretend to have a Politburo that gets together. Oh, but somehow the political opposition in the Politburo didn't show up this time. Why? Because they were all murdered. Historically, the opposition gets murdered. There's no opposition allowed in China. You oppose the dictator and you're gone, or imprisoned, or you die, or all your money's gone and never heard from again. There's no such thing as socialism. It's a lie. It's always a dictatorship of murder, imprisonment, harassment, extortion, and of course, theft, where they move on any industry they want to take over and control. Primarily oil, right? Yeah, and food, let's not forget food, so that their supporters get fed and their opposition does not. Because the hungry people are easy to control. All you got to do is throw in a few loaves of bread, they'll vote for you forever. Where else? Oh, how about North Korea? Oh yeah, there's a real socialist state, right? And the Kims have ruled there as dictators since it was created in like 1950. Same family. Dictatorship. Where's your socialism, guys? Oh, that's not real. Yeah, you damn straight it's not, because there is no such thing as socialism. It always degrades into a dictatorship. Cambodia and Pol Pot. How'd that socialist experiment go? How many millions got murdered? How many millions were murdered by Russia under Lenin and Stalin? What was it, 20 million? Or was it 20 to 40? And how many were murdered under Mao? When he starved half the population, was that 40 to 60 million? So between the two socialist experiments, they murdered 100 million people. Now, how is that good for the people? That's not socialism, that's dictatorship, that's slaughter by an invading, conquering philosophy that's so incompetent it can't even feed the population it takes over. So it has to murder it. And why is it incompetent? Because the people they put in charge of the farms, the factories, the government, the energy have never done anything like that. In Chernobyl, a cobbler was in charge of the nuclear industry. That's what happens in a dictatorship, is idiots who are not a threat to the dictator are appointed to the most important jobs. And then go about destroying everything in society from the top down by their incompetence, greed, corruption, and theft. Every single time. No exceptions. Romania, Ceausescu, and this guy named Georgiu Dej, since after World War II, and Cuba, Castro. Oh, how'd that go? Oh, yeah, they're still just reveling in the prosperity of the Castro socialist revolution. Dictator, dictator, dictator. Every single one of these guys is a dictator. There's no socialism. It doesn't exist. East Germany, Ulbricht and Honecker, dictators. There's no socialism for the people, no food, no health care. Hungary, Rakusin and Kadar, Bulgaria, Zhukov, Czechoslovakia, Gottwald, Novotny and Husak, Poland, Beirut, Gomulka, Jaruzelski. Over and over and over again, every single one of the socialist states of the United Soviet Socialist Republic were dictatorships. They weren't socialist experiments. They were dictators every single time. Socialism degrades into dictatorship. And that's what the youth are advocating for today. Dictatorship. Albania, Hoxha, Yugoslavia, Tito, Ethiopia and Africa, Miriam, in Zimbabwe, Mugabe, Libya, Gaddafi. And of course, South America, let's talk about Chavez and Maduro in Venezuela that turned the most prosperous, wealthy, advanced nation in South America, Venezuela, which was wealthy from its oil revenues and activities. They turned it into a hellhole and a pit that everyone is abandoning that now produces nothing that the country processes. And it's only U.S. intervention there that has put the oil back online, that has convinced the oil company to go in and start taking oil out again to send to the U.S. to be refined, since everything in Venezuela is shut down. It'll take a while to reopen. Every single time, everywhere it happens, socialism degrades into these terrible, terrible dictatorships that don't feed the people, they starve them, because as I said, they appoint incompetent fools who are loyal to the dictator but have no idea at all how to run the country's agriculture or energy production or utility grid to deliver the water systems, the sewage systems, if they exist at all. It's always a dictatorship that moves on controlling these critical infrastructure grids that allow them to feed and support and supply their political supporters while denying access to the regions of the country or the portions of the city that don't support the current political administration. So that if you don't go along with the dictator, you're starved out or outright murdered or imprisoned for re-education. Let's not forget that part, right? Re-education, yeah. And they don't just kill you, they send you to the camp to learn about their values, their agenda. No private property, no right to work. You're a slave of the state. And of course, part of our problem here in the United States is that we don't really have a capitalist system. I mean, it's in the name, a capitalism. There's supposed to be a free competition for capital as well as goods and services. It's not supposed to be a monopoly on currency and credit that belongs to a central bank that's a quasi-private government facility. And of course, we're talking about the Federal Reserve Bank, and that is the fifth plank in the Communist Manifesto. Government controls the currency. So you don't have a true capitalist system. You have a quasi-capitalist system. It's quasi-socialist. How socialist is it? Well, let's look at how many planks of the Communist Manifesto have been implemented. The second plank is federal income tax, a graduated, to quote, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. That's where you find the direct taxation of labor, of income, of earnings. That's where you find graduated class taxation, non-uniform taxation of the people. You tax the wealthy more than the poor, which of course is unconstitutional, which requires that all taxes be uniform amongst the citizenry. They can be graduated amongst the corporations and the licensed and the foreign, but they have to be uniform with respect to citizens. This whole concept of graduated taxation is communistic class legislation that is repugnant to the Constitution, and I will debate this with any judge in the country all the way to the Supreme Court if you want to. But no one will appear to debate me about anything. They won't debate me about the original legislation of the income tax, which was a tariff act, which required the collection of tax from foreigners, as well as imposing a whole list of tariffs on imported products. They won't debate me about liability for tax, which is the liability under Statute 1461 for the indirect liability of the collector to pay what he's collected. They claim liability is created by a regulation when there's no liability in the statute. And of course, when you do that, you use the regulation to create liability. You create the direct tax that they made up under the 16th Amendment. It wasn't there in the Constitution, they made it up. It wasn't there in the statutes, they made it up under the regulation. Well, Loper Bright says you don't get to declare liability beyond the declaration made in the statute. Moore says there isn't any direct liability because it's an indirect tax. The only liability that exists that's direct is the liability for the tax you collected by withholding tax from persons subject to the withholding, which turns out, under the 1913 original income tax legislation, to be only foreigners. Citizens aren't subject to the collection of the tax at the source until 1945, and the employment taxes we're under now. Oh, that's right, but the victory tax expired, so why are you subject? Not by law. You're subject because you voluntarily allow it. You ask for it on a W-4 instead of claiming exempt. And having asked for it, they let you have it. Smack! They let you have it. Don't they? Boy, do they. And of course, once you start and create the presumption, the erroneous presumption of direct subjectivity to tax on your right to work or the fruits of labor derived from the simple exercise of that right, once you create that presumption, it becomes difficult to escape, doesn't it? Yeah, that's right. Very difficult. So, what we have is a completely and totally fraudulent system of political organization being taught to the youth for 25 years who are now drunk on the Kool-Aid, duped and delusional, completely deluded about socialism. Oh, it's so wonderful. They've never done it. They've never done it because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It has never existed. Okay, I hear that second commercial break coming up, so we'll be back in 5 with more, and I'm going to give you one example where they had socialism for a little while. We'll be back in 5. going to Okay, this is Thomas Fried on the Liberty Works Radio Network. This is the Truth Attack Hour, and let's just get right back into our discussion. As I was saying before the break, socialism is a complete and total fraud. It does not exist. It always, always, always deteriorates into a dictatorship of totalitarianism and absolute authority and control, where there are no compromises with the others in the party, and all political opposition and economic opposition within the state is eliminated by the dictatorship and the Communist Party, or the Socialist Party, whatever it's calling itself. So, the only place where I could find out, when you play with the AI, I've found that the AI has agenda behind it. A lot of times the AI has agenda behind it. I asked the AI to identify where socialism has worked. And the AI came back with one example. One example. It said, in Great Britain, socialism worked because it existed right after World War II. Gee, I wonder why the people were looking for new political leadership at the end of World War II in Great Britain, or France, or Holland, Germany. In Great Britain, from I think it was 1946 or 47 to 1954, it said the Socialist Party was voted into office. And it nationalized a number of industries. And they pointed to this as socialism is successful. And I'd say that's absolute nonsense. How dare an AI engine try and present that as socialism? That was not socialism. That was a socialist party in a democratic system, temporarily being elevated to the party in control. But they left office when they were voted out in the democratic system within 8 years. 1954, I think, was the end of the socialist rule. And at the time, of course, it wasn't the Socialist Party that took control in Britain. It was the Labour Party. And the Labour Party was apparently presented by the AI as socialist, but it wasn't advocating for socialism, it was advocating for labor, which you can argue is close, but not the same thing. So this example in Great Britain, where a socialist party in a democratic system was temporarily elevated after the emergencies and catastrophic economic and civilian circumstances of World War II, the Socialist Party was, or Labour Party, a socialist equivalent apparently, was elevated to power. And of course they didn't kill all the opposition. That wouldn't have gone over in Great Britain. They have a king that sits on top of this political system who can interfere. So the Socialist Party was limited to the extent that it could wipe out opposition. It did, however, successfully nationalize a number of industries. It also, however, wasn't able to run the country successfully enough or well enough to stay in power. They got removed. So what I would argue is that's not really an example of socialism working. That's an example of a socialist power temporarily being elevated to power, and the people of the country finding out shortly thereafter, and it's all a lie. They don't work for you. They don't make things better. They steal things. They take over stuff. They tax you. They reward their friends. They punish and target their enemies. And then they destroy what prosperity there was, to the point where the people no longer want it and will vote it out of office if allowed to do so. The problem, of course, is that when true socialism takes over, it turns into a dictatorship. There is no other party. Our political opposition is squashed, crushed, murdered, and removed or imprisoned. And any opposition moving forward is not allowed to exist or have the platform, is ridiculed, criminalized, attacked, and done away with, ultimately. So I would argue the Britain Labour Party after World War II wasn't a true example of socialism succeeding, and without that, you can't find one, because it doesn't exist. Everywhere where socialism actually took over and became the system outside of Republican law or democratic order, Democrat being elections of one man, one vote, not a pure democracy where the majority rules. And that, of course, is the difference, as I explained before, between a republic and a democracy. In a democracy, the majority rules, and 51% can actually vote 49.9% back into slavery through taxation. In a republic, the law must apply to everyone equally, and you can't have this class legislation that comes out of a majority rule system. Everyone is limited and controlled by a law that is applied uniformly to all. In a democracy, the majority rules, and they can write law to attack the minority. Like, let's have a direct tax on all billionaires and steal their wealth, and crash the stock market when every billionaire has to sell 5% of his stock on the stock within the same month. Good luck. Let's destroy hundreds of billions of dollars in wealth that the rest of the population is holding as shares of stock in the same companies. Let's just destroy all of their wealth to get 5% of the billionaires. Yeah, right. I got a better idea. Why don't you tax all corporate operations at 5%, no expenses, no deductions, no losses. 5% every month, turn it in, and means test your welfare recipients. Control your spending. Get back inside the Constitution. Stop spending money all over the planet. Spend it here at home on the citizens, not the foreigners buying votes, the citizens. Means test your recipients. Make sure people are eligible. Don't just pass it out. So socialism is a complete and total fraud. It doesn't exist. It's always a dictatorship. And if the youth keep yelling and screaming, that's what they're going to find out. All you're going to do is take a look at what Mamdani's doing in New York, right? He's going to put the grocery stores out of business so he can put one city grocery store in each borough. Now, if you ask me, this violates the New York Constitution, which prohibits the state from giving money to any private organization. The state, the city, the county, any government entity in New York is constitutionally prohibited from creating favorable operations for one corporation as opposed to the other. And I think that ultimately Mamdani plans to give all of these contracts to Muslim businesses. That's where it's all going to go, is to Muslim businesses. That's what he's doing. He's replacing citizens with Muslim new citizens who are going to not enforce the Constitution, but are going to want Sharia law in New York. That's obviously the agenda. Anyone who says differently is lying to you. Straight out lying to you. And of course, dictators produce nothing. These are murderous fools who come out of a bureaucracy where they have done nothing. They've never run a farm. They don't know how to do agriculture or manage it for the country. They've never run a factory or owned a business. They've never run the utility grid or produced oil. These are people who are absolutely incompetent with respect to the experience, knowledge, and network of resources that are necessary to do any of these things efficiently so that they're profitable rather than a loss venture, which seems to be the case in the bottom line with every single thing the Democrats want to support. Solar and wind, those are loss ventures. They have such large upfront capital investments, it turns out they're not viable economically when their amortization lifetime is only 15 years instead of the 30 the original projections were based on. And of course, now 20 years in, we're finding out The lifetime is 15 to 20 years. It ain't 30. You got to rebuild this crap every 15 years. Good luck. The only reason you put it in the first place is the government subsidized it. In other words, taxpayer threw money down the drain, chasing energy production systems that have to have a 100% backup in coal, gas, or nuclear capability. Because the wind might not shine and the sun might not blow, and your grid still has to work on those days. So you're duplicating systems, not becoming more efficient, less efficient, and you're doing it with systems that aren't as economically as efficient, that aren't economically viable unless you waste money subsidizing them up front. Oh, but it was Democrats that wanted to build the solar farms and the wind farms, and funny enough, it was all Democrat supporters that got those businesses and contracts. And then donated the money back to the Democrats at political campaign time. It's all a circular ring of corruption to rule and control, to deny to opposition the necessary grid functions, electricity, energy, gasoline. Socialism destroys. It consumes and destroys. It never produces. It's the other people's money syndrome, right? The problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money to steal to pay yourself and your friends. Venezuela found that out real quick, didn't they? As soon as the oil infrastructure fell, the whole country fell apart. It was the oil revenues that were making them wealthy. When Maduro moved in, or Chavez moved in and destroyed it within 4 years. Chevron left. Couldn't operate. Chavez and Maduro made it impossible because dictatorships destroy. Socialism destroys because it's a dictatorship in practice. Every single time. Socialism is a lie. It doesn't exist. It has never existed. It will never exist because of human nature. When you put that much power in the hands of one man, 99% of the time, it goes awry. And when you get that benign dictator, that unusually rare individual who sacrifices his own wealth and well-being to actually help the people and advance it, well, when he dies, someone else takes over. And I don't think there's ever been 2 benign dictatorships in a row. So, socialism is a lie. It's an absolute lie. It doesn't exist. It has never existed. It will never exist. It can never be done properly because it doesn't function as a socialist system. You could never make any decision with 200 people sitting around a table. It just degrades into 6 or 7 different groups and no decision can ever be made. And that's exactly what happened, which is why the dictators step in and say, F all of you, we're going to do it my way. And the ones who say no, they die that night on their way home in a cab accident, or a plane crash, or a train derailment, or a heart attack. That's been a big one in communist states for a while now. Oh, I had a heart attack. Yeah, right. I'll bet he did. I'll bet he did. Yes, sir. So, no private property. Federal income tax, Federal Reserve Bank, public school. These are the planks of the Communist Manifesto. We don't have a capitalist system. We have a quasi-communist socialist. And that's what's been failing. The way to fix it is to get rid of the socialist elements and return to a free enterprise system.